Thank you. Ranking Member Gillibrand.
I'd like to turn it over to Senator Kim.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member. I agree. This is an incredibly important issue, and I hope that this is something that can spur us to work in a bipartisan way. And certainly from my state of New Jersey, a lot of what we need to be thinking about in terms of what comes next when it comes to medicine, pharmaceutics, but recognizing that we need to do a lot more when it comes to the manufacturing and the supply chain side to make us more resilient. I think resilient is the right word. Because we see not just with the national security side, but a lot when it comes to just the economic competitiveness of the United States and understanding where we need to be going to on a number of different fronts. I'd like to just pick up where my colleague left off. Dr. Pierre Vincenzi, I just wanted to get a little bit more of a sense. This market-based resilience benchmark, I think you framed. Is there a comparable example, or is there something that is being used in other industries or sectors that can help us kind of understand how this might come about and how it might be structured?
Thank you for that question. And yes, in fact, you don't have to leave the pharmaceutical industry. Let's take a sophisticated multinational company, generic or innovator. They do this themselves on the goods they purchase. And so let's say you're a large innovator pharma company and you're looking to ensure that your multi-billion-dollar product is never short, because you have a huge economic incentive to do so. What you do in your own supply chain is you would never buy all your key ingredients from one place. You'll have two sources for every ingredient. In addition, you'll send your team to inspect their facilities and make sure they meet your own quality standards. You create a contract which is a long enough term that the supplier is committed to you just as you're committed to them. This is normal. Everybody does this. This is nothing innovative. That process I just described, it works. It's why innovator drugs are not on the shortage list, except for unusual demand spikes, which we know are something entirely different.
And how do we then take that type of model, though, at a societal level? When we're not talking about just a company looking out for its own bottom line, and in particular, what is the role of government? What can government do that others can't do so that we can understand how to fit this all together?
And the key here is that the buyer, in the case I just described, is one single company with a rational reason to create a resilient supply. And the challenge we have in the US is there are thousands and thousands of buyers who all wish this to be true, don't feel empowered to do so, and actually don't have the mechanism to even pay more money because they don't know what they're paying for. So then the answer would have to be both the creation of the benchmark, so they no longer have the excuse that they don't know how to pay for quality. And once you have that, then you have to create an incentive or perhaps force there to be contracts that reward people for scoring high on those benchmarks. There are different parts of our drug supply, which will be harder in some than others, but we believe that where you see the most drug shortages today, which are in hospital-administered drugs, is actually probably one of the easier places for leverage, especially because the federal government has its own leverage for how it purchases medicines. And you see this in quality of care, the tools that can be used. So I'm not saying it's extremely easy, but it's not unprecedented even in healthcare.
No, thank you for that. Dr. Ball, I wanted to just pick up on something you said, which is about that quality assessment and being able to have that alongside the geographic. Can you give me a better sense of how that quality assessment could be done at the scale of what we're talking about here?
Absolutely. So the paper I referred to assumes that the FDA's site selection model scores, which are risk-adjusted scores that the FDA uses both at the drug and plant level to determine when to inspect a plant, that some form of those would be amalgamated into a 5-star rating on a drug, and that a 5-star would be the lowest risk facility, 3-star would be moderate risk, and that's what we used in this study. The FDA has this data. They would be very resistant, I believe, from my experience in discussing this with them to give it out and use it, but it's at least a starting point. And it's a combination of adverse events, recalls, inspection scores, anything that's happened at the plant or the drug that is a negative experience creates a higher risk drug, and that would be used to put a score on the label.
I see. Mr. Baker, I just want to end with you here. In your testimony, you highlighted how FDA investigators often have to deal with demanding travel schedules and conditions, can fall ill, how, in many parts, in many of these inspections are taking place in locations where English may not be a primary language spoken, yet there's no requirement for independent translators. I wanted to just get a little bit more of a sense for you. What steps do you think Congress should prioritize to ensure that we're giving our FDA workforce the support that they need? And also just thinking through, are there other steps like better strengthening our collaboration with foreign regulators and other steps that we can do to try to address these needs?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think one of the things that can be done is to increase the level of investment in the FDA investigators. A lot of disruption happened in the FDA during the COVID times where a lot of, for example, on-site training and hands-on training was sort of moved to remote, and that isn't as effective. Prior to that, it would take 2 or 3 years to get qualified, so to speak, to do a foreign inspection, whereas now, due to resource constraints, you may be tasked with doing those inspections, those challenging inspections that you just mentioned, in like 2 months after getting hiring. May not have the skills and the training necessary to do those effectively. It's very challenging. You'll fly into an airport and then you get in it, especially if you're trying to do it unannounced. You're going to get in a car, taxi, someone you don't know, and drive 4 to 6 hours to get to your hotel that may or may not have air conditioning. Yeah. It's very difficult and challenging. They need additional support to really enhance this existing program that they know works. Those unannounced inspections have about a 4-time greater chance of identifying a problem that's going to cause harm to a human versus unannounced. That's what the data shows. Great. They're very effective. So investment in that area is worth the effort.
Thank you.
Yeah.
With that, I'll yield back.